Welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you today for our Enchantment Live series, and this is episode 6. I fondly call this the returning home, the warm hug you give to yourself. I'm Cheryl Papilla, and I am so happy to be here with you. A few years ago, I had traveled to northern Kenya, and I do a lot of humanitarian work in Kenya, and sometimes I'll bolt on a short safari. And so I had never been to the Samburu region. And I was really, really excited. So the Samburu is in the northern part of Kenya, where most of the time I've done safari is more in the Masai Mara. And if I'm honest, this trip did not go any way that I planned. It's really mountainous in the area, and there were heavy rains, and the weather was delayed, and the flight was delayed, and you couldn't do any of the drives or excursions that you really want to do when you go to the Samburu. And I kept getting so frustrated, why is this happening? I came all this way. I'm missing the experience that you're supposed to have. I'm wasting my time. I wanted to see the Samburu is known for these incredible sacred rituals that they do. They're kind of these nomads that move from place to place in groups. And I wanted to see it, and I wanted to see this beauty that I imagined I would encounter as I was experiencing all of that. And instead, because of the weather, I was forced to sit still. I had a journal, and I was just writing so fast in this journal. I was writing about how I wanted to do things and all of the stuff that I felt like I was quote unquote missing out on. And then I look down and I see this rock, and it's literally, I kid you not, it's in this heart shape. All of a sudden, I feel like I looked out back into that landscape, and I almost felt the spiritualness and the ritual and the beauty and the sacredness of it as soon as I let everything else go. And I know it can sound like, oh, Cheryl, what a coincidence. But I really, really believe in that moment, I'm so grateful that I chose to look at that as an invitation. I stopped trying to control the experience. I stopped trying to force this meaning that I'd been told or researched about. And I stopped optimizing the journey or the experience I thought I was going to have based on everything. And as I released that grip, everything changed. My thoughts became clearer, my journaling changed. And I began to go out, and I asked if I could speak with some of the local Samburu nomads. And, obviously I had a translator who was helping me. And I started to listen, differently and really observe everything that was just taking place all around me so naturally. And, what struck me the most was nothing was a performance. It was this incredibly powerful presence. The Samburu have lived, for generations with deep relationship to the rhythm, to land, to ceremony, to community, and to interconnection. There is this beautiful coexistence that happens. And there's a steadiness in that, right? A relationship with life that did not feel rushed or fragmented. And I started to realize I wasn't there to kind of consume this, fake experience. I was almost there to release something. And, the pressure to constantly control outcomes, the belief that every moment to justify itself through productivity. I hate wasting time, and sometimes I've been really working on developing my relationship with time differently, and what does it mean to waste time? So for me, sometimes keeping busy is not wasting time, where in essence, what I was realizing as I was in the Samburu and time was just moving at its own pace, and I was coexisting in its own pace, that as I loosened my grip, I really started to become part of that journey, right? I really started to come back into the me and what I was meant to experience during that time. And I think that's why I love this series so much of Enchantment, right? Because it's about learning how do we loosen our grip long enough actually to arrive inside of our own lives and inhabit it. And that can seem so basic. And I think sometimes we, often kind of misunderstand enchantment. We think it's like this, peak experience, right? This dramatic awakening, a perfect moment, and that, right? A moment in time versus a way of living. But I really believe like enchantment's not about the escape, it's about the embodiment. It's about returning to ourselves, learning how to stop abandoning ourselves in the small, invisible ways that can happen so easily if we're not paying attention. And in turn, right, learning how to hear ourselves again beneath the noise and learning how to move with intention instead of fear. And honestly, maybe enchantment is just easier than we think. Maybe enchantment is the warm hug you give yourself when you finally pause long enough to ask, is this mine to carry? Or is it not? Because so much of our exhaustion in today's world comes from gripping lives, identities, fears, expectations, outcomes, you name it. All these things that we were not meant to control. And when we loosen that grip, something extraordinary happens, right? Our clarity returns, our humanity returns, our breath returns, our lives begin to feel like our own again. I don't think that that's an easy thing for people to realize. When you loosen the grip, it doesn't mean you don't want to have, live a meaningful life. It doesn't mean that you don't want to succeed. It doesn't mean that you don't believe in your purpose of being here and want to have a tremendous impact, right? And achieve all these high things. What it means is that you bring the clarity to understand what is it meant for you and what is the clarity of the mission of why you're here and how you show up in a way that is not for others but is for you. And that to me is like, that's magic, people. That is pure magic. I often talk about art. I majored in art history, and one of the things I loved about it, and I think it's been so incredibly helpful in my career, in my life journey, because there's so many different ways to look at a piece of art, and I can interpret it, way different than you. But yet we're looking at the same thing. And what it allows us to do is to have a discussion on different perspectives. There's an artist, Agnes Martin, and her paintings are really, really subtle. They're quiet, they're spacious enough to like almost disappear. Like you have to be really kind of like looking at it. And there's no like demand with it. There's no like urgency. There's no competing priorities on the canvas. But there is something about this presence, and people often misinterpreted her work as restraint, right? Because there's like these graphs and stuff. But I really think it was about freedom. Like when I look at it, I see this quiet devotion to steadiness, to simplicity, to an inner peace versus, an external force. And I think many of us are searching for that right now. Not a louder life, not a truer one, not more control, but more connection, right? Not perfection, but coherence. And the older I get, the more I realize alignment doesn't feel like these fireworks. It's not like, woo, here you are, you've arrived, right? It feels like relief. Honestly, it feels like you're exhaling, and I like to say your shoulders go down. If I really think of the best way to describe it, and I use this a lot with people, it's like giving yourself a warm hug. And I really believe that when we do that, in turn, we're so much more open and available to give others a warm hug that perhaps that they need. It's not like everything becomes perfect in that moment, but I love the warm hug because inside you finally feel like you stop fighting all of these different voices and priorities, your shoulders, I say like shoulders down, right? Your shoulders drop, your breath slows. You can literally feel like your nervous system like, whew, okay, because you're not searching for what happens next. And that's really honestly where I feel like what home actually is. I love my home, I love my space, but I really have found that I travel quite a bit, personally and professionally, and home isn't a physical location. It's not a place. It's the moment that your body realizes it no longer is performing, right? And it's like it's resting. It is belonging. It is loving where it is in that moment with a great amount of peace. I think one of the greatest lessons in life was learning like what's truly ours to carry and what is not. Because so many people lose years trying to control what was never theirs to hold. I really believe that in some cases, people don't even know what questions to understand, and it's such a natural way of living. And I think it's a really, really great gift, and that's why I love doing this series with you all, because I feel like we're kind of going through it together. And some things we know and some things maybe we've had practice in the past, but this is bringing us back to it. What I find is that in the essence, when I'm trying to control, you kind of lose sight of the life that's waiting for you. Control is often wearing sophisticated clothing. We grip tighter because we think it will protect us, but it often disconnects us from ourselves. And maybe, wisdom is not controlling everything around us. Maybe wisdom is learning what is truly ours to carry and navigating the rest with grace. I think you learn along the way where you're taking things on that are not meant for you. And in those moments, I think you lose the productivity you bring. I think you lose the value that you contribute. I think you lose the focus to do your best. And so I think this lesson, right, of navigating back home is just so important, because it's not about like disengaging from ambition. It's not about becoming passive. It's not about opting out of meaningful work. If you know me, that is like the crux of who I am. I really believe it's the opposite that's true, right? I think we're most powerful when we stop leaking, right? These little energy sucks, right? We stop leaking our energy and trying to control what was never ours. And instead, that's when clarity comes in. That's when creativity returns. That's when our presence returns. And in truth, right, with all that's happening in the world today, that's when humanity returns. And I think that's what we need right now, right? I think it's what the world needs. We're living in this time of acceleration, and I think it's really exciting, right? AI, all this constant simulation, but there is this element of performance, this endless information, and that's why I love like all these theories about we're going back to analog, like as much as the technology is increasing where we're going, our ease of working, our ways of bringing ourselves forward. At the same time, people are yearning for a little bit more of that human presence, right? And what I think is happening is that there's almost this deficit between all of this innovation, all of this excitement, but human presence, human interaction is decreasing. And I think we really need to be mindful of that. How do you ensure that your human presence is showing up? Because when someone is grounded, when someone understands what's theirs to hold and what's not, they become extraordinarily, right, effective. If they're able to remove all of, right, the noise that happens, that's around them, if they're able to listen, I spoke about this before, if they're able to listen to the signals, right, they become healthier. They are the ones who create safer environments. Self-aware people lead in their lives differently. They conduct their lives differently. I believe so many people lose years trying to, control what was never theirs to hold, right? Whether that is past experiences, whether that is, kind of absorbing what others are around them. And in turn, right, they're forgetting the life that was actually waiting for them. And when we stop abandoning, right, ourselves, we stop building these like fake kind of environments that we believe to be true. That's where the real evolution happens. And that's the most exciting part of what's happening right now, right? It's like, while there's so much excitement with the AI, while there's so much kind of excitement in the possibility, right, we have the ability to also use this to become way more human than we have been, more present, more intentional, more connected. Because I don't believe, right, I don't believe humanity is the obstacle for this progress and the innovation. I deeply believe humanity is the path. And maybe that's like the real call of this time. Not simply to move faster, not simply to achieve more or, optimize like yourself to Kalamazoo, but to become more conscious about how we move through the world, more intentional about what we carry, and more honest with ourselves about what truly matters, and more connected to our knowing, because we all build systems, right? You might not even think of it that way, but you do, whether it's your family system, whether it's your friend system, like there's all these different systems. Every relationship we shape and every culture we create is influenced by the state of how we are doing inside of it. And so this next evolution that we're on, right, is a real call to action to stay human while we're accelerating in the world, right? To lead without losing ourselves. When we stop like the gripping for what's not ours, we create space to actually flourish and contribute our best, right? Our gifts, our clarity, our human, right, kind of empathy. And that's where, I think this is the most powerful. It's not through domination, it's not through proving, but through alignment, through the steadiness, right? Through the truth, through the presence. And in times when the outside is so loud, this is a gift, right? This is a gift you can give yourself, and this is a gift you can give others, because in that gift, right, you're creating differently. You are making innovation happen, and you're making humans more integrated together, right? There's a line from Mary Oliver. It says, you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And I think many of us, have spent years trying to override ourselves, right? To push harder. I was talking about the Samburu earlier, right? To grip tighter, to outperform, humanity. But I think maybe life is different right now. Maybe life is asking us to soften enough to finally hear ourselves again. I used to think like, when people say, I feel so free, or, I'm so in alignment, it would be like this dramatic like crescendo. And I don't think that's what it is. I think freedom is like knowing and sitting inside your own life without needing to leave it, leave yourself to survive it. It's like you feel like your jaw's not clenching, shoulders are down, and it's like giving yourself that warm hug, right? I love the warm hug after carrying too much for too long. There were parts of my journey where I started to release things that were not mine to carry. And that's not easy work for people. And I have a lot of, people I know who are doing that, who are trying to do that. But when they do it, right, that's the real becoming. Because you're not becoming someone else. You're becoming and coming home and returning home to you with open arms, right? And having the grace to release what is not yours to carry. And maybe that's where we'll leave our enchantment chapter, not with this perfect conclusion, not with everything figured out, but with this quieter kind of knowing, right? A steady compass, a softer nervous system, a deeper relationship with ourselves, and hopefully, just hopefully, right, a life that we are finally beginning to fall in love with, that is ours, right? It's not the one we're performing. It is ours to be lived. I truly want to thank you for being part of this series with me, for pausing with me, for softening, for remembering with me. I've loved creating this space more than you know, and I love the reflection and the conversations I have as a result of doing these. And while this enchantment chapter is closing, another one is already beginning. So stay close. There is more ahead, more truth, more wonder, more humanity, more becoming. But until then, pause, take a breath, give yourself the warm hug, and I am giving one to you, and come back to yourself again, because your life is waiting for you to finally arrive inside of it. And maybe, just maybe, the arrival is the real magic after all. I'm Cheryl Papilla. Thank you so much for being with me, and I really look forward to seeing you soon. Be true, be present, be love, be one.